Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It's Rob Kosberg here with another episode of our Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. Have a really special guest, someone that I have followed for some time, read his first book several years back and thoroughly enjoyed it. Trevor Blake built 3 successful startups and sold them for more than $300 million. Now he's written a complete instruction manual that covers everything the budding entrepreneur or existing business owner needs to know to build the career of business of their dreams. He's the best-selling author of 3 Simple Steps. That's the book that several years ago I read. Trevor's most recent book, or more recent book, is Secrets to a Successful Startup. We'll talk a little bit about that. You also, of course, Trevor, have been doing quite a bit of podcasting. You have a Facebook group which you go live in once a week. You give generously of the wealth of your knowledge. And so really excited to have you here and connect as many people to you as possible. Thanks for being a part.
Oh, thank you, Rob. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. We were just chatting about, your various places where you are. You have a place in Washington. Of course, I read about your casita on the Pacific where you do your work for your 5-hour workday. I want to get to that, but maybe before we start, I have some questions around 3 Simple Steps, even though that is a book that you wrote, I guess, maybe almost 10 years ago at this point.
Right, 2012, but I still get more emails from 3 Simple Steps than anything else I do in the universe. So,
love to hear that. Well, I mean, it's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it to anybody. You talk about, several things within that book that, I think most business or entrepreneurial type books don't focus on. And that's what I really enjoyed. You talk about stillness, you talk about mentality, you talk about having and creating moments of insight. I wonder if you could just go into depth just a little bit on that, this idea of, directly relating moments of insight to creating a successful business and making a difference in the world.
It's a great question. I mean, everyone's experienced that. Everyone's been in the shower one morning and you're not focusing on anything. And then suddenly you have this great idea and you slap yourself on the forehead and say, why didn't I think of that 3 years ago? It could have saved me all the angst and stress. So as a kid, I used to read, I still do, read biographies of self-made people in any aspect of life, musicians, adventurers, but also business people. And I was always blown away by the fact that they all had this method for putting themselves in a position where the great ideas come to them and they don't go chasing, all the best entrepreneurs I've met or read about didn't set out to be a great entrepreneur. They had an idea. It came from nowhere. It's brilliant. And it happened that way for me too. And so I've always been fascinated by that. So I've structured my lifestyle around putting myself in a position to be open to that. And so you have to do that in certain ways because first of all, you have to have control of your mentality, because what happens to most of us is we have a brilliant idea and then we foolishly share it with somebody and they say, oh, that's a dumb idea. And it's gone. It's crushed. Right? Okay. So you have to have control of your mentality so that you can sort of ferment this idea, let it build and gain its own energy. And doing that requires that you become more of an individual and get less influenced by media or other people's opinions. For me, the saying, the true measure of freedom is to be independent of the good opinion of other people, is one of my sort of go-to phrases that keeps me trusting myself. And then, once you have control of mentality, then it's an opportunity then to kind of deepen your connection with your intuition, so that when an idea comes to your head, you don't have the voice in your head saying, oh, that's crazy. You're not qualified. You can't do this. Who do you think you are? You trust your intuition and you feel very calm in your intuition. You say, as crazy as this is, I'm going to do it. And all the great entrepreneurs, that's how they've been. You take like Richard Branson, his motivation to start Virgin Airlines wasn't because he knew anything about airplanes. He knew nothing about airplanes. Right. He wanted to get to his girlfriend who was in the Bahamas and his flight was cancelled. So he charters a plane. He just has this brilliant idea. I'll charter a plane. His motivation was to not be jilted by his girlfriend, not that he wanted to be a great entrepreneur in the airline business. A new airline was born, a new customer service system was born, things like that. Wonderful ideas that just come to us in these moments of time. But you have to prepare yourself for that. So once you're deep in your intuition, then you make more optimal decisions. So instead of trying to analyze things or saying, I've got an idea, let's have a meeting about it. You know, your intuition says, no, let's go with this. And you just start it and off you go. And then the third part of 3 Simple Steps is basically taking your idea and not just thinking bigger, but thinking bigger than bigger and bigger than bigger than bigger. You just want to go really high. So when I started my first company, didn't know what I was doing, didn't have any capital. Started it with $200, totally out of my depth, but I dreamed really big. And so I set my intention of selling that company for at least 100 million, even though I hadn't started it yet. And even though I had no idea how to get from, oh God, I don't have a job anymore, to how, how am I going to pay the mortgage? And, it sold in 6 years for 105.5 million. So it's that. This is what I learned from all the biographies, that this is their approach to life. You use your imagination, you control your mentality to the extent that no one can throw you off track. I mean, we always get knocked back, but you can come back again, those kind of things. That's basically how that all came about.
Love it. Love it. Now, you've given us a synopsis of it, and I highly recommend anybody to purchase it and go into a little bit more depth there. But talk to me about, some of these concepts sound a lot easier, and there are steps, and there's focal points that you take to do it. So talk to me about getting in touch with your intuition. Yeah, I mean, we've all had moments where lightning is struck and we have this maybe seemingly brilliant idea, but how do you create an environment to foster that kind of thing? How do you do it personally?
I use nature as my grounding and my classroom for that.
Yeah.
And I was always motivated to do it because I was lucky enough to be married for 40 years to a wonderful woman who had incredible intuition. And I can remember the two, unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. She died last year. But I could just say to her, what do you think of this? And she thumbs up or thumbs down. And she was always right. And I wanted a little bit of that, I always said to her, if I could bottle women's intuition, I'd be the richest man on the planet. No doubt about it. So I had to work at my own because I was more of an analytical type. I kind of second guess myself all the time and allow myself to be open to other people's opinions at times. And so I learned, again, through biographies and also talking to other successful people, I learned that one of the secrets is to get out into nature as often as you can, not with your phone, not talking, you have to be, it's like, so nature is, the way I describe it is like, you can't describe what having a bath is like by watching somebody fill a bath with water. You don't know what it's like until you actually get in it and you go, this is a bath. This feels lovely. This, same with nature. You can't understand the power of nature by observing it from a distance. You have to immerse yourself in it. And so I learned, and this is what all these fantastic pioneers, from C.J. Walker through to Henry Ford to anyone you want to mention, they spend a lot of time in nature and not reading contracts or doing business while they're in nature, but just being in nature and just connecting. And then the understanding, they didn't know why it was working in their days. Today, I'm a scientist. So today I like to know how or why it works. It works because everything's energy. The whole universe is made of jiggling strings of energy. And once I realized that, and once I learned that, it opened up a whole new world to me. And that means that, I can take my jiggling strings of energy, which is made of exactly the same stuff as the tree's jiggling strings of energy, and I can deepen my connection with the universe. And since I started doing that, that's where the magic has happened for me. So the way I structure my day typically is, 2 hours of what I would say, quote unquote, productive period where I'm doing emails and reading reports and all that kind of stuff. And then my gong goes and the gong says stop, because it's scientifically proven that the brain can't concentrate for more than 2 hours effectively. After that, it's diminishing returns. Get out into nature. So then I'll go for a walk. And again, 2 hours, and I treat it with the same discipline and the same ritual as I do the 2 hours that I was sat in front of a computer. It's as important, if not more important. And I'll just go out into nature. And it sounds kind of new agey, but it's not. It's scientifically proven that we connect this way. And so I let my neurons out to play. My 100 billion neurons go to play with the trees. And I just go for a nice walk, nice and calm, stroll, and all kinds of magic stuff happens. And when I come back, I've got all of these ideas, all of this energy, all of this motivation that was starting to stagnate towards the end of that 2 hour period earlier. So I split my day like that. And in doing that, I learned to trust my intuition, because all of these ideas come to you and all of these suggestions come to you, and you think, if I tell anybody else what I'm thinking right now, they're going to lock me up.
Right.
But I know this is right. And so we'll go off with that. And, it's proven in the business models because every business I've built, there's always been a group of people who were lining up or taking a number, waiting to tell me it's crazy and it's impossible and it can't be done that way.
Wow.
And, when it's successful and it's sold off for the whatever number people are willing to pay for it, those same people don't come back and say, we were wrong. Well done, son. Like that. They disappear. They're never to be seen again.
Right.
So, and all that is down to trusting your intuition. And we all have it. Women are more, I think, generally, I know you shouldn't generalize, but I think women are more connected to their intuition than we are, as men are. And so there are tools and techniques that men can learn that can help us try to catch up a little bit.
Okay. Well, I need to know what they are. First of all, I do want to hear what they are, but let me just backtrack for a moment. So 2 hours focused, you're working. I assume that this is after whatever your morning routine is. You perhaps have a morning routine with exercise or whatever your morning routine is, but then work, 2 hours of work, and then 2 solid hours in nature. Yeah. And this is a daily exercise of yours.
Yes. And all the books, that are written about what makes self-made multimillionaires, there's dozens of those books. You'll find this is a common theme. In fact, one of the most popular books says that over 50% of self-made multimillionaires is qualified as 30 million or more. So multimillionaires, they do what you just mentioned. So they do 2 things. They have this morning period, no email, no text, no devices, no TV, no radio, a specific ritual first thing in the morning, which includes a form of meditation. And then they start their work. Some of them have 3-hour period before they start work. I keep mine down to 2. And then this 2-hour period of doing stuff. And then no more, no less of 2 hours of not doing stuff. So you get out into nature and totally immerse. Now, it can be other things too. There's quite often times I'll go out for a walk for an hour, and then I would have gone for a 2-hour lunch with my wife, but I don't come back into my office until 2:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
And I don't take my office with me. I have separate devices for work and separate devices for personal life, because otherwise they overlap each other. And once you're distracted, science shows it takes 35 minutes to get back on track. And you don't want that. What you want is success with a balanced life. And so you want to park your business and park your personal lives in separate places. So I'll do all kinds of different things in those relaxation periods. And it could include a nap, and it could include taking meditation. It could include going for a walk in nature. But the important thing is that you have that break, because scientifically it's shown, first of all, the brain can't concentrate more than 2 hours. I think most people know that. Secondly, science also shows that when we're at our most creative is when our brain is slightly tired. And that's the opposite to what most people think.
Interesting.
And so if you do a 2-hour period of hard work, your brain is saying, well, I'm a bit tired now, I need a break. That's when you can do the really creative stuff. So I like to write, obviously, as well as work on my businesses. So I often use those, use these break periods, as we call them, or the relaxation periods. I often use those periods to come up with my creative ideas for articles and podcasts and books and courses and that sort of stuff.
Wonderful. Wonderful. As someone that is an author and I work with many, many authors. It's what our business is. That's really intriguing. I've never thought about that. I actually oftentimes, because the writing is so difficult for me naturally, I often focus on that in the morning, like as first thing. But I like the idea of your creative brain, being more engaged and more in tune after maybe 2 hours of work, and then letting the writing flow from there. How much writing will you do? Will you do an hour, 2 hours? What does that look like?
Between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, but typically it's 5 to 6 is productive writing, and then 6 to 7 is preparing dinner. And when my wife was with me, we always had dinner together. So as I'm chopping and chatting and drinking a glass of wine, I have all these, hang on, and I go back to the pad or the computer and make sure I don't forget this next line, this kind of thing. So for me, it's later in the evening. So between 5 and 7, I'm at my most creative. That's when I produce all my articles and podcasts for trevorgblake.com for the Guild and courses and stuff like that.
Very good. Very good. Love that. That's gold. Now, that's quite a bit later in the day. So, you've had a pretty full day already up until that point. But so you must be tired, ready to wind down, that sort of thing.
Yeah, my brain is that, because our brains are working obviously the whole time to interpret the 3-dimensional 5-sensory world around us. It's all an illusion. And the brain's converting it into, there's a wall, there's a computer, there's Rob, but we're all made of the same fermions and bosons when we get to the microscopic level. Yeah. So the brain has to work quite hard, even for us just sitting in a chair. The brain's working quite hard to help us understand that we're sitting in a chair, No so the brain does get tired the longer we stay awake. So I just find that is a more productive time for me from a creative standpoint, a writing standpoint. Other people might have a different thing, but it's interesting that And then let's say in a more technical and more serious arenas, let's take NASA pilots. I don't think you can get a more technical or more serious job than a NASA pilot.
Probably so.
They insist that their pilots take an afternoon nap because their production goes up 34% and their reflex reaction goes up 34% after taking a nap in the afternoons. Okay. And, if NASA believes in this, then who am I to say that there's not something there? So I take all that information and think, okay, so I'll try and match my lifestyle the same way. But it also makes for a really enjoyable lifestyle. I do have some friends who work 14, 16 hours a day. They're entrepreneurs, but they're on their third marriage. And the kids can't stand them. The dogs don't even know who they are. Right. That's not a way to live, For me, I was totally dedicated and motivated to Lynn and my family lifestyle. So I would never let work get in the way. So it was an easy decision for me to make to structure my day that way. But it's paid off because, I was wonderfully happy for the 40 years that Lynn was alive. And I'm very grateful for that. That was a priceless thing these days. But I don't think I don't think they're unrelated. I do think the way that I'd structured my days and my nights really helped also keep a balanced life so that, Lynn felt part of Trevor Blake and a part of life, not an extra that was brought in at certain times of the day, which I think a lot of relationships become that because people work all the hours God sends,
I really love that. I've been married for over 30 years myself. When you said you were married for 40 years, I immediately thought, okay, this is an interesting person. You have an element, obviously, an obvious element of engineer, scientist, but there also seems to be a spiritual element in here. Not that connecting with nature is not a scientific fact, as you mentioned, string theory and those kinds of things. But is there you've talked meditation, you've talked, several things that just lead me down a spiritual path. Is there a spiritual element to all of this for you as well?
Well, I think if people want to label it now, and because we've lost the means of communicating telepathically, we have to label everything these days. So you can label it as, spiritual element. I think that's quite appropriate. For me, it's all about energy and connection. So that if, Alan Watts once called life is a playing of energy. Yeah, I love that. Him. And we're all one suchness. And to someone who doesn't know that sounds very new age and very spiritual. And what's this guy smoking? But it's the reality of life. Yeah, but for me, I'm a scientist, so I'm a physicist, so I want to understand it from an energy standpoint, from a physics standpoint. So I've always done that. So I've always applied that. So the definition of magic, it's the changing of one form of energy into another form of energy within the laws of nature under the power of will, and that's all it is. That's what I do with the company. I have an idea. I convert the energy of the idea into a real thing that becomes a company that hopefully impacts people's lives. Yeah. It's the same with anything. And so you could say that's a spiritual element, but I could say, well, it's a physics element. And so it just depends on your position of observation, if you like. Being a scientist, I always like to know how and why things work and then use that for my benefit. So if I can understand energy and I can figure out a better way of playing with it, I can achieve better outcomes. Rather than just letting it happen randomly in my life. So some people would look at that and say that's a spiritual approach, and some people would say that's a really good physicist at work.
Yeah. No, it certainly seems like that's the scientist in you, right? You've quoted statistics like, multimillionaires, 50% of them have these different processes in their lives, and these are people that are worth $30 million or more. And so you've definitely approached this in a scientific manner. But what intrigued me was, you seem to have such a well-rounded approach to life. Everything from, the course that you're giving away for free, that I'd like to talk a little bit about that because, your course that you're offering, and we'll give a link later and we'll put it in the show notes, that focuses on being productive with 5 hours of work, means that you want to give the rest of your life to other things, a relationship that lasted 40 years. And the way you speak of your wife, and I'm so sorry about her passing, clearly it would have continued had it not, been for the challenges. And so you have a very, very well-rounded take on life, which oftentimes you associate with people that have kind of a spiritual element. They look at the big picture rather than just, the scientific elements of success, if you will. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's hard to achieve success without that element to it, to be honest with you. The mantras, I'm not big on mission, vision, value statements and things like that. I think that's sometimes a lot of nonsense. But right. So all of my companies have had the same mantra, as I call it, and that is make a positive difference in someone's life. Have fun doing it, because what's the point otherwise? Yeah. And then sharing all the rewards that come naturally as a result, material and otherwise. that you get from setting that energy in motion. And that for me has been that's the way I've lived my life and the way I've run my companies. And hopefully I've had some influence on other people to think a little bit more that way. Right. And that makes you naturally have a little bit more balance because energy flows. And so if you create, a positive energy, you end up attracting more. And you let that flow and you impact that in some way. And then you get even more. And so, this is how I describe financial independence. It's not a place to get to.
Right.
It's about creating flow that you can dip into on a regular basis. And, once you follow the principles that are in my courses, the transformation course in particular, then you allow yourself open to that really big flow of energy, which has previously would go around you because you were either working against it or stagnating in some way. And so once that happens in your life, that's where it feels like it's all happening magically and it feels a little spiritual, but it really is just letting energy do energy's thing, just letting it flow.
Very cool. Very cool. I didn't know this, but I saw it on your email when we were emailing back and forth, and I wonder if I could pry just a little. You had a link to one of your companies, well, just two, the Trevor Blake main website, and the other company, which is a company focused on cancer research. You mentioned the passing of your wife. Is there a connection there? What's your focus there? What's the passion behind that?
There is a connection, but the main connection is my mother because she died of breast cancer when I was 20, but she was diagnosed when I was 7.
Oh, wow.
And she taught me the meaning of the word indefatigable. She was not going to die until her kids grew up. She just told us. That's mum, right? So mum says, you're not going to die, you're not going to die.
No kidding.
So she handled her cancer with tremendous grace, very powerful, and soon to be a movie, actually.
Wonderful. And
it's a movie called Audrey. We're in pre-production right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, it's very exciting. And I want her message out there because everything I have and have done in my life is as a result of what I observed or how I observed my mother living in poverty, how she handled these things that were thrown away. So she handled her cancer with tremendous grace, but the side effects of the treatments robbed her of her womanhood and dignity. And that always bothered me as a kid. I got to observe that for 13 years. And so I've always been fascinated in finding alternative treatments for cancer that may or may not reduce the tumor, but certainly don't diminish quality of life. And so basically, we've been developing a non-toxic treatment for cancer. We're in clinical trials right now. The data looks fantastic. The company's called Neovia Oncology. The link with my wife is that my wife was my mother's chemotherapy nurse, and that's how we met.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that's the link there. So yeah, again, everyone, like we were saying before, everyone told me this is impossible. There's no such thing as a non-toxic treatment, but we've found a way to do it. We've taken a long time. We started this in 2005, and so now we're in phase 1 clinical trials with really late-stage cancers, solid tumors, and the results are really intriguing. And I'm not really allowed to promote them. The FDA would have a field day with me if I did, but I can say that we're at incredible doses, high doses with no side effects. And I can say that we're showing efficacy in previously untreatable cancers.
That is wonderful to hear. Do you happen to know, this is interesting to talk about this on a podcast, but do you happen to know who Perry Marshall is? Do you know Perry?
No.
I need to connect you to. He is a wonderful person, and he's done some really interesting things. His latest book, Evolution 2.0, I did some help with as far as some marketing, and I've done a number of things with him. But Perry is more well known for people listening to this podcast in the marketing world, Google AdWords and things like that. He's done some work with Richard Koch of the 80-20 principle stuff. And he is working with a number of people in the cancer space more as a passion project of his. In fact, just this morning I was reading about some of the work and some of what they're doing, and I don't think things are coincidences. So the fact that I was literally just reading that in a newsletter that came from Perry, if it's okay, I'd love to connect you to, because there might be some very, who knows, interesting ways that you guys can work together. So
yeah, and you never know. I mean, that's what life is all about: synchronicity. Once you are open to the flow through what we call the Higgs field, then all these connections they're just fantastic. They're so magical.
You have thrown out several things that are really intriguing. One, I meant to say something, but we got caught on something else, and that was you made the statement something like, when we've lost the ability to, what was the
Well, we lost the ability to communicate telepathically.
Yes,
So
yes.
we have to.
So we really used to have that. Tell me more.
Well, yeah, we still have it. We still have it. No one's lost it.
Okay.
We have to refine. You have to find your way back to it now. So I was blessed with my wife that she was clairvoyant and clairaudient and telepathic, and so I learned firsthand how real that experience was.
Wow.
And I was fascinated by it and loved it. So I've learned ways, and you can find them on trevorgblake.com. I've found ways, tools and techniques that can help us get back to where you just know stuff. You know, I love that way where you know what someone's thinking and and you know what's going to happen next for them and all this sort of thing.
And it's more than intuition.
Oh yeah. It's real communication, but so you communicate without talking. But I find it valuable in all kinds of different aspects of life. I have an animal sanctuary called Fluff Sink, and which is an amazing experience. But I find there I have the most use for not actually speaking, because our voice is really irritating to animals, and they find out slow communication is so frustrating, and that's where I experience most of the telepathic communication. It's wonderful. It's an amazing thing, and I feel so blessed to have stumbled across tools and techniques that work, and they work for anyone. So
wow.
What you're doing is you're opening up a part of your brain that we haven't really used very much for several millennia. But I find it very useful across the negotiating table too.
I bet you do. I love that.
I've given away my number one secret to the people I'm negotiating with right now.
I can't wait to dive in. You said there's some information on your website about it, so I can't wait to check that out. That's wonderful. Super intriguing. Really have enjoyed this conversation. Maybe we could change gears for just a minute. Part of what we like to talk about on the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast is for those that are authors or that want to be authors, it's inspiring to hear how other authors have used their books to make an impact on the world, to make more money, to close deals, get speaking engagements, that sort of thing. Your books have been incredibly successful. I wonder if you could speak to that. Any great stories, or, you had even mentioned before you get emails all the time on 3 Simple Steps. So talk to me a little bit about that aspect of your authorship.
Well, the 3 Simple Steps was written after my first success, and it was part of my thinking that I would give back.
Right.
I also had told my wife that I was taking some time out, and after 2 weeks of pacing the kitchen floor, she said she was going to murder me if I didn't start something new. So it's actually was also self-preservation.
Right.
I wrote 3 Simple Steps, and I was blown away by the reaction to it. I didn't put any money behind marketing. It became so we'll talk about several aspects of this, but it became a New York Times bestselling author, but I was able to help that happen. That's very important, I think. And then after that, I've been writing books more for fun and more for impact. When I think back, I'm gray haired now, I'm up there in years, and I think back to, several decades ago, I was in awe, and as was everybody else, of anybody who had a glossy business card.
Yeah.
They must be doing really well if they can afford to buy glossy business cards. And they were, in those days, you kept them in a little silver or gold, almost like a cigarette case in your pocket and everything. And pulling this out and presenting it was a big deal. Right. And I kind of smoke and mirrors saying that, I'm successful. I think books do that for us now. I think people expect you to have taken your knowledge, particularly if you're in the service industry, to have taken your knowledge and recorded it in some way that's going to be beneficial to everybody else. And I think everyone is quite susceptible. If you have a book and you have you've got your face on the book, they have this automatic, well, it must be real then, or it must be good. And I think you have to play to that, because if you don't, it is part psychological. And if you say, well, I don't want to be perceived that way, then I think you're missing an opportunity. And the second aspect is that I think you really need to be a bestseller. And you can be a bestseller, you're not a bestseller, you know better than I do, so preaching to the choir, how you can become a bestseller in many different ways. You can sell a lot of books, but that's not the best way to become a bestseller. You become a bestseller by having your book sold in all 50 states in the same week. And there are companies, maybe you're one, that specializes in helping people become bestsellers. I think people really still take notice of bestseller. And there are so many self-published books now that if you don't have that, or a gold star or something you can put on the cover, I think it diminishes the marketing impact of it. I became a bestseller with 3 Simple Steps because I gave away a copy, not thinking about what I was doing. I gave away 16,000 free copies to every library in the US, because libraries had literally saved my life as a kid. and not realizing that that would get me New York Times bestseller status. And my claim to fame is that I launched at the time when 50 Shades of Grey was the number one book in the US, and I knocked it off number one spot for 2 hours.
Wow, congratulations. Hey, that thing sold like 50 million copies.
I know. I became more interesting than sadomasochistic sex for about 2 hours, and then everyone went back to 50 Shades of Grey. I'll have that on my gravestone.
That's great.
But what I found is that, in different parts of the world, books are perceived in a slightly different way. So I do a lot of work with Asia, and having a book is huge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. And they take the book first and they show it around and they hold it up with pride like a business card. And I'm introduced to people. I'm going there for business, but I'm introduced as he's this writer before I'm even introduced to. And so my credit is sky high before I walk through the door. So I found it to be, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't intend it that way, but I found that to be a very useful thing. And I think that's, in certain businesses, that's going to be really important, but especially in the service industry. If you've got a book that, hasn't just sold one copy, but it has some good testimonials in it.
Yep.
And it provides valuable information. I don't think I would start a new company without that these days. I think it's expected.
Well said. Well said. Boy, thank you so much, Trevor. It's been wonderful talking to you. I really I enjoyed it. I love the talk. I love the science. I love the energy. I just love what you've put forward to people. Let's, give some links. Where would be the best place for people to connect with you? Where do you want to send them? I know you have some free stuff that, you want to make a difference for people. So let's talk about that.
Well, more than that. So it's these podcasts and these things that I do and my books and my courses, they're not for me. I don't need the money, right? So all of my proceeds from any of that stuff, that one suchness, all of the proceeds go to cancer research and development, or my animal sanctuary, every cent. It doesn't go into the pocket of a highly paid executive. I don't have any. So every cent is used for a good cause. So I like to put that up front first. Otherwise, it sounds like self-promotion, and I don't mean that.
Good.
All you have to do is go to trevorgblake.com and go down the rabbit hole. There's lots of free stuff, articles, podcasts. There's the Practical Magic of the 5-Hour Workday is a free download.
Yeah.
I think I made that free because I was writing it as COVID happened, and there's a tsunami of people moving into working from home, and I think it's essential because we haven't mentioned the fact that a lot of people get the working methods from working in the corporate office. And then when you come into working by yourself at home, the tendency is to sit in front of your computer for 8 hours, hoping that an email comes through, and you get burned out so quickly.
Right.
So you have to be very clever about how you spend time at home. You'd be 10 times more productive than in the corporate workplace, but you have to be conscious of how your brain's handling that. So I made that free for everybody. And if that's all you get, then that's worthwhile. So that's made a difference. But if you're interested in transformation and secrets to a successful startup, the books and courses are available on the website too.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. As I told you, I've been a follower since I read your first book several years ago. I'm looking forward to reading your next one, which I just ordered, as I mentioned before, downloaded your course. Of course, you're also on Facebook. You have a group on Facebook that people can be a part of as well for free. So thank you for giving your wisdom, your knowledge out. You're making a great impact, and much appreciated. I love what you're doing.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it.